Well, I'm glad y'all are here, and let's get started. Revelation chapter 7 is where we ended last time. I'm not going to do much of a review, but remember, in this section, if you have your outline that I gave you, it'll help you sometimes to look at that and glance. Overall, I suggest, because of Charles Talbert, I think he's right, that in general you might say there are 7 visions of a similar thing, and that is what we might call the shift of the ages. The first 6 are basically about what happens before vision 7 is what we might call the consummation. Now, I'll tell you when we're done that this is the end, close to the study. So we've got 3 weeks concluding today. So after this week, there's 2 more weeks. So today we're not going to cover as much as we were before. What I'm going to do today, we'll see what we'll cover today, and then the next 2 weeks, I want to make sure we spend a good bit of time on the final chapters, a lot of people's favorite chapters. We are not going to cover all the 6 shift of the ages. We've covered the first one, and that was the 7 seals. If you remember, each seal if you remember, I suggested that the tribulation, the shift of the ages, the before the final judgment day, it gets worse and worse and worse. And remember the 4 horsemen? You're looking at me kind of crazy. Remember that? So it's pestilence and famine and death and so forth. And then we get to 5, and that's seal 5 is when the people under the altar were crying out, "Oh God, help us." Seal 6 is when the moon turns to blood, the sun is darkened, the stars start falling. Oh my, the mountains fall upon us. Oh my goodness. And then 7 is, we're not at 7 yet. There's what we might call an interlude. Before 6 and 7, before the final seal of God's last will and testament is opened, he makes us think for a second, a little reflection. And he's going to have a little interlude between 6 and 7 over and over again. After this, we're going to hear the 7 trumpets. We're not going to go much on those. It'll be 5, 6, and then there's an interlude, then 7. We don't get to 7. He'll make you pause. So that's kind of overview. So now, back to the point, we just finished the 6th seal. In Revelation chapter 7, we noticed that he's going to do this interlude. Before I say that, very quickly, in the Childbirth book, page 34 and 35, I really like how he did this little chart I'm showing you here. This little chart. He shows you the parallels of the tribulation aspects, of the problems that come in Revelation. If you don't have to right now. We're not going to. But Mark 13, Luke 21, and Matthew 24 are the parallel sections when Jesus says the temple will fall and then these things will happen. In Mark 13, Luke 21, and Matthew 24, he put that right beside Revelation chapter 6. And it's amazing. They're almost exactly the same. In fact, they're real close to Luke 21. The point is, this is clearly a what we call in scholarship a trope, a common pattern, the go-to image you want to go to. Like I've said this several times, like this is a common pattern where you talk about famine and war and pestilence, and you seem to escalate on the scope. And he showed a chart to say, see, told you so. In other words, even in the Gospels, it's just the common thing you do. Now, that doesn't mean it's false. It doesn't mean it's true. It's just the common go-to thing. But one distinction in Revelation is that there are martyrs and that the martyrs call out. That's not in any of the Synoptic Gospels. And that's a big deal. So we see there's a common pattern. One, clarity. That's one thing. It's common pattern. 2, I said something last week just to always try to be very clear. I said, I think whenever there's this pattern of 7, the famine, pestilence, build, death, war, and sun and moon, that escalation, I think the first 4 or 5 each time, seals, trumpets, later on it's going to be angels, this tribulation era, I think the first 4 or 5 have to do with the here and now. Or rather I might say, in their audience, their time. So that when John said famine, his audience heard, oh, I know famines. When John said it's wars and the rider of death, they go, I know people get killed all the time. When he said the horse is red and it's anarchy, I've heard some cities going anarchy. In my view, those are current events. I think it's on purpose to draw the audience in to go, man, he's speaking on the newspaper these days. I might be wrong. That's my point. That's my nuance. I might be wrong. Maybe all of this, in John's view, is only in the future. No, there will be famines to come. There will be anarchy to come. And some people read Revelation that way, that all of this is not to happen at all yet. Some read Revelation as all of it's already happened, which is to me very hard to understand because clearly some things haven't happened. The new world hasn't come yet. But it seems to me that this more the middle approach I find more compelling. Now, you can make up your own mind. So that's why when I interpret it and I hear famines and pestilence and lions and bears, oh my, I think they're thinking, hey, we get that. That's why I ended last week. I said I think it's John's way of giving a theological interpretation of why all the junk's happening in the world. I don't think he's just giving them a prediction. I think he's giving a theological reflection on what they are currently experiencing. And it also builds suspense. Well, wait a second. If I recognize numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and kind of 6, 6 is real bad. That's the sun dark. That's about to happen. I think it builds suspense for the people, like it somewhat might do for us today if we go, hey, I know war and famine and so forth. So that's why I'm just nuancing. Of course, I might be wrong, but I think so far most of this is about in his time period. So in chapter 7, we have my little interlude. We're waiting for the 7th seal to be opened, and here he goes. I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth. In the ancient world, I didn't unpack this last week, by the way. I just read it, and I'm unpacking it. In the ancient world, it was a figurative way of talking about probably like northeast, southwest to say the 4 corners. And it was a figurative. That is, most people in the ancient world did not think the earth was flat. Most people in the ancient world thought the world was circular. And some thought it was spherical, but most thought it was a circle. Around the edges, Roman time, there's a big river, big ocean. There was water above, water below. So 4 corners became a figurative way of saying, probably to some degree, we might say northeast, southwest. They hold back the 4 winds of the earth. There's a lot of allusions to the winds of the earth, winds of heaven. But loosely speaking, this probably just means judgment. So here are these angelic figures who are blocking judgment, just for a little bit, because that's what happened on the 7th seal, that no wind might blow on earth or sea or against any tree. So you're pausing. It's the holding on for they're holding their breath. Verse 2, I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun, the seal of the living God, and he called with a loud voice, of course it's always loud, authoritative, to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm earth and sea. So they had the ability to enact judgment, God's judgment. He says, don't harm the earth or sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. So he's saying right before you do all the judgment, pause for a second, let's seal them. Now sealing is the same reason why we seal today. If you see those commercials, some of you might have it, when you make food and you seal it right away, that freezer bag, and it sucks all the air out. Well, in the ancient world, they didn't have an ancient seal your steak, but they sealed for the same reasons. They sealed to protect. And so when you put, whether it be a scroll or an object, you put wax and you seal it, it protected it. So they're not protecting God's people from tribulation. He's saying let's protect them through it. He didn't say let's take them away from it. He's saying let's take God's faithful and make sure they do not, we might say, apostatize, abandon the faith. Let's seal them first. In fact, many Jews use the word in circumcision, they use that as a seal. That is, they were God's people, sealed, protected from God's judgment because they've been circumcised. And I heard the number of the sealed, those who are going to be, you might say, spiritually protected from apostasy, they're 144,000. Oh, by the way, why on their foreheads? Why on their foreheads? Well, that's probably a direct reference to Ezekiel 9. In Ezekiel 9, it says that there are people who God's looking and they have a mark on their foreheads, and it demonstrates they're repenting and that they're remorseful for the sin they've committed. And most interpreters don't think that literally meant Ezekiel walked around and God was looking for marks on Shauna's head and Chris's head and looking literally, but a metaphor for repentance. They look like they're sorrowful in the book of Ezekiel. And here, almost certainly the same kind of thing. They have a demeanor about them. Okay, so that is to say, don't harm them. We've sealed them on their foreheads. It's going to be all over them that they're, you might say, to some degree, protected from apostasy. And I heard the number, and it's 144,000. Now, if you look at these tribes of the sons of Israel, these tribes, they're Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Now, Joseph and Benjamin should be put together, but they also left out the tribe of Dan. Now, Dan in Judges, the book of Judges, was known for having some idolatry in their background, so he probably deliberately omitted one of the tribes because he's demonstrating what happens when you are idolatrous. You're cut off from those who are sealed. You're cut off. But he has to add a tribe that's usually not added like Benjamin because he has to have it to be a perfect 12. It's got to be 12, Jacob. So he had to name a tribe that usually you don't because he cut out Dan. But that's the deal. So what do we do with this number? People do different things. Some say it literally means 144,000 Jewish male virgins of the tribes of them. Some people say that. And you got to be consistent, though. If you think it's 144,000, most people suggest you got to keep on going. You got to be on literal. Some say it's pure symbolism. It seems to me, and for a lot of interpreters, that if you do this number, 144,000, it's 12 times 12 times 12, right? All right, sorry, Jacob, don't hit me. 12 times 12. I was thinking the tens already. Times 10 times 10 times 10. So you have 2 groups of 12, 3 groups of 10. Let me start with the easy one. 10, remember, 10 is an indeterminate amount of time. It's a way of just saying it happened for a length of time. The bigger the multiple of 10 is, the longer the time is. So 10 times 10 times 10 is 3, which is also can be a number for wholeness or completion. So it's a big fat number. What about these 12 and 12? Well, there's different ways to think about that. But my view is that 12 represents the 12 tribes of Israel. And in Judaism, it's commonplace that 12 is the Jewish number because it represents 12 tribes of Israel. What about these other 12? I think those other 12 are a reference to the 12 apostles. This gets a little confusing because the apostles were Jews. But by the time John's written his document, Revelation, the church was largely Gentile. So I think this represents what we might call, I think Talbert even says this, the full measure of God's people. That is to say, the Jew and Gentiles put together. So I think it's something like 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles, that is Israel and the church. I think this is a way of saying it's the full measure of God's people, both Jew and Gentile. And a little bit, he says something that confirms my thesis, my hypothesis, because he'll say from every tribe and tongue. I think that's the point. Now, some groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses think it means literally only 144,000 people are going to be saved. I find that profoundly uncompelling. The number one reason why is because this is the genre of apocalyptic. Every single time you hear a number or an image, you should ask the question, remember, how does it make me feel? What does it evoke? You don't ask the question, what color was it? What kind of butterfly was it? You've missed the point. If this were a newspaper article, you should think 144,000. But it's not. It's an apocalyptic document. It's very different. Verse 9, after this I looked, and behold, a great multitude. Now, in Greek, it literally says, at verse 9, it can be after these things, after this I saw. That's fine. But I don't want you to think that every time he says that, it's chronological that it happened afterward. It's that he saw the vision afterward. Let that sink in. I can think of different things in my mind at different times. It doesn't mean the sequence that I think of that is the sequence that actually occurred. I tell stories to Elaine all the time, and I deliberately say, I'm getting this out of sequence so it follows a logical order versus a normal conversation back and forth with me and Bob. I'll knock out the sequence. And then I said, but it doesn't really mean in history it happened that way. He had visions in this order. After this, I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands. Now, standard belief is, back to your question here, is that this probably represents the 144,000. And that's why, that's certainly my view. My view is that this represents those people. And for him to say every number, a large number that no one could number, it's that big. So it is a huge number for a fact. But every nation and tribe and people. These are the ones who were before the throne and the Lamb. Remember that the throne is in Revelation 4, the Lamb's Revelation 5. Clothed in white robes. White robe means purity, but also priestly class. That's what you wore when you were in the temple. Palm branches in their hands. Palm branches was well known, particularly at the Feast of Tabernacles, which celebrates the celebration of the harvest coming in and so forth. But also, if you remember, and I'm sure you do, in 2 Maccabees 10:7, in 2 Maccabees it talks about when the Maccabeans came in and purified the temple. When Judas Maccabeus came into the temple to clarify it, guess what they fanned in front of him? They laid down on the floor with palm branches. And that was before Jesus was born, by the way. So when Jesus comes and they put palm branches down, they had to have been thinking, my mama told me those stories. My grandmother told me she was alive when this happened, and he was there. So these are palms of victory. There's a good old Gaither Vocal Band song called Palms of Victory you need to listen to. And now you can listen to it. Verse 10, and crying out with a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. Listen to that. Who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. So salvation, of course, they've been saved, they've been rescued. Verse 11, and all the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and the 4 living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, saying, Amen. Blessing and honor and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen. This is all going on right before the 7th seals burst open. And they're saying it's a big fat worship throne. He's so glad that he has saved us. That no matter how bad the tribulation is, those who are faithful in their white robes get to thank him personally.
Can we see palm branches
That's a good question. Does palm branch have two meanings? I don't know of the other instances where they wave them in hope that they will be saved.
Well, I'm thinking of Palm Sunday.
Oh, and Palm Sunday. Yeah,
Gotcha.
gotcha. Yeah, and I never thought about that when Jesus palm branches, but they're if you read it carefully, they're not waving them; they're lying them down on the ground. So but nevertheless, the palm branch still represents salvation's coming to them. So there's a degree. I would have to say, not to be what's the word I'm looking for, pedantry. I don't want to be I'm not trying to be overly nerdy or precise here. I think it's both and. I think when Jesus, for example, when Jesus came, they laid it down. I think they really did think he is saving us right now. He's about to go in there right now. I can see it with my eyes. He's going to nail them. He's going to get the Romans. He's going to send down angels or something, because messiahs can do whatever they do. So I think there's a degree to which they thought it was happening right then. And certainly there's a degree to which is a hope, because he's not doing it as he's riding on a donkey. He's got to get somewhere. But it's a near future hope. Okay. And that's my concern about saying the word hope, like one day in the future. So I think it is hope, but I think it's more of a near future. Real future. Okay. Good question. Verse 13. Then one of the elders addressed me, saying, "Who are these, clothed in white robes, and from where have they come?" It was common in this kind of literature and other Jewish literature to ask these rhetorical questions. It asked the student, because the idea, particularly in rabbinic circles, the student was supposed to turn around and say, "I don't know, why is that?" Imagine asking your child every time, "Hayden, why do you think the sky is blue?" "I don't know, Dad." "Why do you?" "That's a good question, son. Here's why." If I turn around and give you the answer, it starts a conversation. So it is a common thing. And I said to him, "Sir, you know," dummy, it's in the Greek. No, "Sir, you know." The point is, you know, so tell me. So tell me. And he said to me, "These are the ones coming out of the great tribulation." That seals 1 through 6, basically. "They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." Yes, white and blood go together. Blood, because, you got to think like a Jew, blood was splattered on everything to make it ritually pure. It would have looked, to me, quite disgusting to be on an altar, and it would have smelled pretty gross too, and birds and flies and whatever. But the sacrifice, when they killed that lamb, and they would get almost like paintbrushes and splatter all over the altar, it made it ritually pure. Then you gave the sacrifices. And that's why, particularly Baptists, have a lot of bloody hymns. We're bought by the blood of Jesus, saved by the blood of Jesus. It's from the New Testament. It's not just made up willy-nilly. But the blood means we're become ritually pure. It doesn't literally mean they've got blood dripping from their robes. Nor does it mean literally wearing a white robe. The point is they've been purified because of the Lamb. So they've come out of the great tribulation. Therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. Listen to that, in his temple. It means the dwelling realm, the dwelling presence of God. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb in the midst of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Now that sounds a whole lot, of course, like Isaiah 49. It sounds a whole lot like Isaiah 25, Jeremiah 31. It sounds like Revelation 21. All these, in the end times, all this pain will go away and you're going to be comforted. He's giving you a foreshadow of what he's going to say really explicitly in Revelation 21. And we'll get there probably in 3 weeks rather. So he's giving a forecast to the people when you go through the tribulation. If you stay true through all the hell that's coming to you, you'll keep your robes white, keep them pure, don't fall away, and he's going to help you. You'll be right before the throne of God, and you're going to be singing your praises. You're going to make it. And then the seventh seals. Here it is. Here's the last will and testament of God. I hate that it's called chapter 8. This should still all be one vision. It's ridiculous, so it gets confusing. When the Lamb opened the seventh seal, it literally is, and then he opened it, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. That's called anticlimactic, because he doesn't want you to give the seventh seal. There's silence. Now, it's not that anticlimactic. To a degree, on the narrative level, it makes you pause, because the people really want to hear, what's it going to be like when judgment finally comes and I get vindicated? But
Can I get a beer now?
Yeah, go. Can I go? Can I get a beer? It's like, hey, you got some time? Yeah, potty break. Yeah, for judgment. Theologically speaking, it's hard to tell exactly what's going on because, in fact, one commentator gave multiple parallels to silence. Some before worship, some before on and on and on. I think Talbert is right. I really do. He mentions for Ezra, which is written about the same time. But I find this more compelling. I think what's going on there, and maybe these are all true, but I think the silence has to do with what we might call a primeval silence. Because like in 4 Ezra, it says, and creation at judgment is restored back to the silence of what it was before creation began. That is, it's silent. There's no chaos. There's no order yet. Imagine the universe with no noise, which is easy to imagine because there's no air. But the idea is, theologically speaking, it's complete silence. It's going back to the original calm state. And there's also drama because it's on a narratival level. It's just, like I said before, suspense. And there's a, what's going to happen? For Ezra? You don't know For Ezra, Jacob? Everybody don't know? Read that for bedtime stories? It's a document. Sometimes it has other names too, but typically we call it For Ezra. It's a Christian book. Huh? The book of Ezra, no. I mean, the book is called For Ezra. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 Ezra. Yeah. So, of course, I was teasing when I know you haven't read it. It's a pseudepigraphic work. So it's a part of what we call the Christian pseudepigrapha. And if you want to read it, you can go online. It's free, I bet. But Charlesworth's edition, there's a 2-volume work on the pseudepigrapha. Pseudepigrapha means false inscription. It's under a false name. And these are Jewish and Christian works written under a false authorship about various things. And we have to study all that stuff in scholarship because it gives us really good insight of other things they thought at the time, like what I just said, like the silence.
During the intertestamental period.
Yes, ma'am, from about 200 BC to about 200 AD, there were numerous Jewish and Christian works written that they read and they wrote that were not canonized later by the church to say these are official sacred texts. But they, in the time period, read them, and this document is called For Ezra. Yeah.
Is that in the Apocrypha?
No, ma'am, it's not Apocrypha, it's the pseudepigrapha.
Oh, pseudepigrapha.
And that's a very different collection.
Yeah, that's different.
That's a good question. A different collection. Yeah. I remember I was in a PhD class, and we were talking about the Apocrypha. And I wasn't clear on the distinction between the Apocrypha and pseudepigrapha. We had barely talked about it in all my undergrad or master's. And I'm in this seminar, and it's a colloquium class, which means all the New Testament professors are in this room with you and 4 or 5 other scared to death New Testament students. And and unfortunately, instead of being a very kind, open, let's think about this kind of, it was, they can't wait to hear you say something stupid. They can't wait. Every class. And so you had people like me who were intro students, I remember because when this happened, then the second year students, then the third year students who were treated more like royalty. But man, we were fresh meat. So we all presented a paper. I know this is off the subject, but it reminds me of my ignorance very much. And we presented papers. And mine was Apocrypha, Acts of Andrew is what it was called. And then mostly it's in Greek. Not even all of it's been translated. I'd never heard of this thing. I worked forever to do a paper. Anyway, it's your day to go. And you sit literally in this main central chair. Everyone surrounds you, and they can't wait to jump on you. And one day they were talking about something. I remember Charles Talbert, the guy who wrote that book, was sitting on my right. And he said, like the so-and-so. And I said, right. And I said, in the Apocrypha, this is confusing. You have an Apocrypha in your Bible, right? Okay, that's an Old Testament Apocrypha. And if something's post that, there is no such thing as a New Testament Apocrypha. There is an Old Testament Apocrypha. Those are books collected together, and now they make it to a Bible. But there are a bunch of other Christian books written that are apocryphal, under a false name, or sometimes their real name, but they weren't collected into a book called New Testament Apocrypha. Does that make sense? Well, I didn't know that. So I said, yeah, it's in the Apocrypha. The New Testament, and he made this ugly face, and Dr. Dowd said, he means it's apocryphal. And I go, yeah, I mean that. And I smiled, and he was so mad. He did not like whatever. All that to say, so after that, I did a lot of research. Okay, what in the world is the difference between, so I didn't make that mistake again. Then I was able to understand the difference. So, yeah, so good question. For Ezra, it's from the pseudepigrapha, and not the Apocrypha either. It's a good question. I'm sorry, Erica.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Half an hour doesn't literally mean 30.
Thank you so much. Does a half an hour literally mean a half an hour? The answer is, of course, it could be. It could literally be half an hour. But like you said, because God doesn't have a half an hour. See, that's called deductive reasoning. I like that. Because you have to assume that God, think about, if you think it as literal, you mean God is bound by our solar system and he makes that. And you say, no, David. John's trying to convey that time period from his perspective, which is about like half an hour. I'm fine with that too. I think neither one of those are good explanations. I think it's apocalyptic imagery of a short period of time. I think it's supposed to say for just a respite, like a small breather. So I do not think it literally means 30 minutes. Maybe I'm wrong and it is literally 30 minutes. I think that's not the point. So it's a good question. I think it's about half an hour short. Just a soap opera. What do they call it? A little
One more
sitcom.
question about the Apocrypha.
Yeah, Apocrypha.
What is meant by deuterocanonical?
Good.
That's here in my...
Yeah. Catholics and the Orthodox divisions of the church call that collection in your Bible deuterocanonical. Deutero in Latin means second, canonical canon, so the second canon, deuterocanonical. So it's authoritative. It's been called deuterocanonical. It's a way to call that particular collection because Christians gathered those Jewish documents. Christians used them. Jews didn't think they were authoritative. They wrote them, but they weren't authoritative to make it to Scripture. Christians did. So Christians are the ones who copied the Apocrypha, and they called it deuterocanonical. It was the Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther, who called them Apocrypha. And that's why Protestants call that. Some say it probably was a slam. Apocrypha means hidden, and others say, no, he didn't mean it as a slam. They just mean they're obscure to the average person because not everyone read them at that time if you're a Protestant. But Protestants call it Apocrypha. Everybody else does not. And if you find a really good, rigorous, devout Roman Catholic, they might get a little offended you call it Apocrypha. Do you mean something mean, you Protestant? No, I don't. I'm just...
Really good to know that there are different...
Right, not part of the canon. That's right. So the Apocrypha and the Deuterocanonical collection mean the same thing, and they are in the Old Testament era. They all were written before the New Testament. So sometimes we call it the Old Testament Apocrypha, but there is only one, so we don't usually call it Old Testament Apocrypha. That's Old Testament. And that's what I used to be so confused about. I thought there was a massive collection of books called Apocrypha, which included Jews, Christian, centuries of works. That's not true. It's only about, depending on your canon, 8 to 10 or 12 Apocrypha books. But by the time in the New Testament, that canon's done, closed. But Christians kept writing books. It's just that Christians didn't think those were authoritative to collect together. And so there is no New Testament Apocrypha. There's no collection.
So some of these collections were in Hebrew and some were in Greek.
Some were in Hebrew and some were in Greek. That's correct. Most were in Greek. Most were in Greek. Some were in Hebrew. Some were, but most were in Greek. That's good. So verse 2, I saw 7 angels who stand before God and 7 trumpets. And I'm actually going to, and then the incense and prayers, which you already saw. So the point is, when it gets to the 7th seal and there's silence, nothing's finished. There is no consummation. There is no final judgment. There is no heaven and earth. It's just done. It's just a pause. And then there's 7 trumpets. And it is in my view, to say it one more time, and I'm going to move on, like with Talbert, it's to a degree like it hits rewind, back to the beginning, and instead of 7 seals, it's 7 trumpets. This time around, he uses the Exodus plagues as his background. If you notice closely, that's kind of basically what happens. So you have, if you go down to verse 7, the first angel blew his trumpet, there followed hail and fire mixed with blood. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees. The second angel was a great mountain burning, thrown into the sea. And you go on there. The point is, not all the same, but it's similar to that. If you go down to verse 12, the fourth angel, the sun was struck, a third of the moon, a third of the stars. We're getting real cosmic here. And then verse 13, this eagle, the soaring, majestic bird says, stinks for you. Chapter 9, verse 1.
So eight is where he's drawing from the plagues of the Exodus.
He alludes to him a good bit. Not every time, but yes, ma'am. It seems to me that he's been influenced by it. Yeah. But it's the same kind of thing. It escalates bigger and bigger. And then in chapter 9, we get to the 5th trumpet. It's getting bigger and bigger. He is the bottomless pit. The bottomless pit, there's smoke from this great furnace. The sun and the air were darkened with the smoke from the shaft. And then they were out told that locusts came out, and they tormented people for 5 months, verse 5, but not to kill them. So this is all creation now is, of course, fighting against humans. I mean, this is pure chaos. The tribulation is now they turn on them. You ever see M. Night Shyamalan, The Happening? Wasn't that called The Happening? Y'all looking at me crazy? Mark Wahlberg, yes. Yeah. It wasn't a big hit. I thought it was pretty cool. Anyway, yeah, that's right. Leonard says, the whole thrust of the movie is that nature kind of fights back. It kind of purifies itself because humans have done such bad that it kind of fights against itself. That's kind of the idea. I'm going to skip ahead, and you can do all you want to there, but the point is it escalates, more and more tribulation, more metaphors of how bad it gets. And
What was it, all the references to a third, and then
what are the references to a third? I don't know what to say beyond it's a portion.
right?
But it's not whole. I know it's not whole because he wants to wait for the final judgment for everybody. So it's certainly a portion. Yeah, if there's more than that, I'm not sure. And I'm sure there's a commentator who tells us what to do. So what do I do with the chapter 7, verse 17, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes? He's quoting directly from Isaiah 25:8. And now later on in Revelation 21:4, is that right? Yeah, verse 4, he'll say the exact same thing. So what do we do with a tear from the eyes? It seems to me that it can be either option A, that means in the heavenly realms, when the world to come comes, we will no longer be sad ever. And it means that he will wipe away the tears and that we will have no reason to be sad. That's certainly an option. I think that's the standard traditional option, and that in heaven, you might say heaven or heavenly realms, people can't be sad because there's no tears, are all gone. They might deduce from that, and I've heard many people who love Jesus deduce from that, therefore, that no one who's dead now can see us now, because why? That would make them sad when we get hurt. And they can't be sad because he's wiped away all their tears. To that I say, I don't find that compelling. So it can mean that no one ever gets sad, fine. But secondly, the corollary that therefore no one knows what's going on in the world today and how bad it is and how ISIS kills people because that makes them sad. I don't find that personally compelling, and y'all might, that's fine. At minimum, it means this, and I tend to lean to this one as the most compelling in my opinion. At minimum, it is suggesting the suffering you've gone through on earth will be comforted once you make it. So the tears that they have are caused by present earthly suffering. That is to say, I don't think the text is speaking about future sadness, but present sadness they have. Very similar to when my children come up to me and they're crying, and I come up and I wipe off the tears, give them a hug, I comfort them, and I go on. I don't wipe off the tears and say, thenceforth you shall never be sad. Now, you say, well, David, of course not. That's not in the heavenly realms, and that's fine. It's just the text doesn't say that specifically. Yeah, it says what? In Revelation 21:4, I say the exact same thing. I was going to say that when we cover Revelation 21. The same thing is, I'm on the same two options. It either means they will never be sad ever again, and that's the tears. It's like both and. The sadness they experience now, because they finally make it to the finish line and they're weeping, and they'll never be sad. Or it simply means they won't be sad because the former things have passed away. That is to say, he's comforting them from what they went through, which is not the same as protecting them from sadness in the future.
Memories.
How memories can torment you, yes.
And I have always liked the view.
So you think maybe God will help us forget,
It helps us forget
those things,
that are so
those wounds. That's a good question about whether God, well, we will remember that. Let me say one more time, and she's gone, but to reiterate, and then I'll talk about the memory and move on. So to answer your question one more time, it seems to me at minimum, he's speaking of God comforting us when we make it to the finish line. That he's going to be like a Heavenly Father who loves on us and says, I'm sorry you've gone through all that. It was worth it. Here's your white robe and whatever. At minimum. At most it means, and once I wipe it off now, as it were, you never have to experience it again. You're not going to be sad. And I'm fine with both options. What I don't find as compelling is, therefore, no one knows what we're going through in this life because they can't be sad. I don't find that corollary compelling. Does that make sense what I'm saying? You find compelling what you would find?
Yeah, so another corollary, I think I know your answer.
Oh, so another corollary might be universalism, that everyone's going to be there. Yeah, so people are in hell and they're upset.
Right.
They won't be tears.
It's like,
Yeah.
To me, I mean, this is just me being honest.
So how can you're saying, how could I not be sad if I know people are in hell and so forth? And that's true. To my response, the Bible, in my view, does not answer the question. My view is, and this ties into what you were saying, does God help us forget the memories or forget the things that cause us pain? My view is that, based on themes, I think, in the Testament, there's no Bible verse for this. I think the theme is that we won't forget. I think we have a perspective on reality that we cannot have here. I think we will have a profound, I mean this, I'm personally convinced of it, and I could be convinced and be wrong, that's fine. I'm convinced that when we die, when our soul leaves our body, one of the reasons is based on people who've died and come back, say something similar to this, what I'm saying right now, and it corroborates my theory. They have a profound sense of, aha, now I get it. And that also, okay, now I am giving my evidence. That's one reason. The other is because Paul himself says in 1 Corinthians that I'm convinced that, and also in Romans, that this momentary affliction will be far outweighed by the glory that is to come. I'm convinced there's a sense to which when we die, when in the presence of God, this veil is removed, the cloud is removed, the fog is removed, we go, now I get it. The suffering makes perfect sense to me, and I accept it. And to that, I have a word for that process I just said. It's redeemed. It's redeemed. If I didn't know why in the world this guy was lying me on the table and smashing my shoulder, my arm back and forth for 3 months, I would hate him. I would never want to believe in him, ever. I would hate him, and I would hate everybody who stood up for that little jerk punk. And then someone says, David, did you not know he was your physical therapist? He fixed your shoulder. Notice how you have 4 range of motion now. I would take back everything I said. I mean, knowledge, the belief system changes the whole perspective. Did I like the suffering? No. But now I don't care anymore. Yeah, well, it was painful, but I'm over it. It makes sense to me. And I think the exact same is true with people who don't accept Jesus. I think the fate they receive, we will have a profound sense of fairness. It just makes sense. It's fair. They chose it. I have an awareness now of all the little choices to a degree that it makes sense. They got exactly what they wanted, and God gave them what they deserved. One of the reasons why I think that is because of people who have died and come back and have experienced a hellacious situation. They say, when I got there, I did not protest it. I knew I deserved it. And if they experience that, and if that's true for all people, and it's all the ifs, right? Conditional. How much more, it seems to me, an off 40-yard argument, how much more so will those who have been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb go, no, it makes perfect sense. Because we have that sense of justice now. When you commit a crime, you should be in jail. But David, I only pulled the trigger for 1 second. Why should I get a lifetime in prison? That's unfair. No one says that. No one says that, because the gravity of the offense dictates how long you are punished. And if we get that intrinsically, God, a perfectly holy moral being, fully understands that, and we don't. And I just think I think that'll kind of bleed over to us, to use the pun to the blood, but I think it'll kind of bleed over and we'll go, I get it now. So that's what I would say to that. So I don't think it implies universalism in the sense that, I hear what you're saying, and that's my view. I don't think it implies universalism in that everyone would be sad. I think people in hell, I'm not sure if they'll feel sad or not. I really don't know. Again, if those experiences are indicative of all people's experiences, they weren't sad. They said they were disappointed, but they said, but I just got it. I understood. This was right. It was fair. I didn't like it, but it was fair. That's different for me, a sense of a perennial sadness, but that's the best I got. I'm not sure. But what I do know for a fact is universalism is not true just because we don't want people to go to hell. I'll say that one more time. Universalism is not a true doctrine just because we don't want people to go to hell. I don't want people there. I don't want to be there. But that doesn't mean, therefore, universalism is true. You didn't say that. I'm saying that for the record on a podcast, that just because we don't want it doesn't make it so. Just like God's view of sexuality, just got God's view of everything. Well, I don't like it. It hurts people's feelings. It's offensive. Join the ranks. Jesus was crucified. That's what happens when you tell the truth. So we don't make up doctrine for that reason. You thought I heard me say that even when they are in hell, they'll have a choice. I don't know how they'll have. I'm convinced they'll have free will, but they will. Again, there's 2 major views. One is they'll have free will, but they're still being punished by a holy sovereign God who says you deserve this. Whether you want out or not doesn't matter. You had your chance. And however he works that fairness out, it's fair. Whether he presents the gospel after they die or they had their chance on earth, whatever. Some say, no, it's fair. He's punishing you. He's the Holy Lord. It's just right. It's like the American government has the right to punish murderers. We just are right. You're a citizen. Get over it. And we are owned by God. We're his citizen. That's the real. The other major way that's more popular to say this, it's more popular because it's more soft versus this monarch, and he has the right to do that. Others say it, they follow C.S. Lewis's lead, who says, if hell is locked, it's locked from the inside. That is to say, they deliberately, if they live forever, if God allows them to exist forever, they forever use their free will in protest. That is to say, they are, as Lewis says, they are rebels even to the end of their own existence. So they're always up in arms, rebel, always up in arms, the best analogy. They got their gun pointed at God, their fist, they're always mad at him forever, and he does not force himself. I like how Dr. Kreeft said this. Kreeft's a great guy. He's an apologist philosopher. He says God does not rape. He loves. He's not a rapist. He doesn't force you to do it. I mean, it's a vivid image, but I like that. He doesn't force himself upon people. And so that's the idea. That's what I alluded to about having the choice they have. And you either say they have a free will, but stinks for them, they're in jail, that is to say, or they do have a free will, but they choose to use it in constant rebellion.
I guess I remember what
Oh, changing their mind. There is a view we call it post-mortem experience, that is after death. There's a small section of Christian thinkers through the last 2,000 years who suggest that God will give people a chance to respond to the gospel post-mortem after death. And there's no Bible verse. Sometimes I throw in a couple of, like in 1 Peter, but none of those verses are compelling for any New Testament interpreter. It's a theological necessity, they'd say, based on their assumption that, there's a lot of assumption there, but if you hold the view that you have to experience, hear, read, whatever, the gospel in this lifetime, and secondly, God did not orchestrate your birth when and where it happens, then thirdly, it's not fair if you didn't hear it, which means that God is perfectly fair. He will give you an opportunity to respond to it post-death. But all those initial assumptions, I could give you different Christian views on that. That no, you are born exactly where you're supposed to be born. God knows what you would have accepted if you had heard it. Or no, you had your chance because Romans 1, everyone looks down around the creation, knows there's a creator God, and what did you do with your moral law inside of you? So there's very different Christian views, but if you follow the train that I gave you, that no, it's not their fault where they're born, no, they have to hear the gospel, then what do I do? And some say, well, then the only fair thing is he gives them a chance post-death. And then the response to that is, there's no Bible verse for it, so why think that? And they go, what's a theological necessity? That's their response. Two, they might say, yeah, but if you hear the gospel afterwards, that's not very fair because of course they're going to choose it. Hey, by the way, there's heaven, there's hell. To that they'd probably say is, no, you're assuming something. What if an angel? What if there's an internal sense of, let me introduce you to this character and you have the choice? Or, I mean, my point is it doesn't have to be the case that they're wooed. Like they take you to Donald Trump's mansion and say, do you want this or a shack? I mean, that would be overwhelming. The point is we just, don't know. But so my personal opinion is I very much appreciate that view because it's trying to take seriously God doesn't want people to be separated from him and his love. You can't be literally separated from God, but I don't think God's in the punishment business. He doesn't want that to happen. He gives people a chance to respond. How and when he gives them a chance to respond, I think, is in this earth. I don't think it's post-death, but I'm open to it. I don't put a lot of stake in it because I like Bible verses. I like some kind of theme, but I appreciate they care about God's fairness and love. So that's the best I got on, if that's what you're saying. There's hell. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flash forward. If you look at your outline, you see a bunch of things, right, in your outline. And look where it says, I think it's in chapter 12. So you have the first one, and then so the first is all the seals, 2 is all the trumpets, and then 3 is, do you have there in chapter, does it start in chapter 12? What does it say there in 3? The opening scene in heaven, that's right. And this is the third time to talk about the shift of the ages, kind of. If you remember, you may not remember, way back when I said it's 6 different visions of the shift of the ages of tribulation, and the 7th one is the world to come, heaven. But a long time ago I said, mostly, it's really like 1 and 2. The 3rd is like a sermon. Then 4 and 5. The 6th is like a sermon, and then 7. Okay, if you look in your outline, it's right in front of you there in your outline. So first is seals, 7 seals. 2 is 7 trumpets. Then this third time around, it's not at all about tribulation. It's trying to explain where evil's coming from, where the temptation to not conquer is coming from. Then he gives, I don't have it in front of me, is it 7 angels of judgment, agents of judgment? What does your outline say? Yeah, and then 7 what after that? That's right, 7 bowls of wrath. And then guess what? The next one is Roman imperial power or something like that. The judgment of the harlot. So if you'll just I'm going to move on. I'll pause me if this is too much. If you got it, I'll move ahead. One more time. Okay, back to my analogy here. I'm going to hold up this little, last time I had a bottle, but it seems to me, I think Talbot's right, that John is explaining the same event basically 7 different ways. Okay, now it's like this, now it's like this, now it's like this. But technically speaking, They're not exactly the same, but the thing he's describing is, we'll call, the shift of the ages, from the present evil age to the age to come. How does that whole event happen? And it doesn't seem to be the case that he's explaining it over 4,000-year period. It sounds pretty similar. It's all pretty close. And so one side is, it's like 7 seals being broken to unleash the lamb. Remember, the lamb undoes the scroll. It's 7. Wow. And then let's turn it over. Let's do that again. It's like 7 trumpets blowing, and it escalates and escalates. Let's turn it one more time. This time, I'm not going to talk about seals and trumpets. I'm going to have a little sermon and say, why in the world why are we getting tempted? What's causing all that? I'm going to tell you about that, and then I'm going to change it. I'm going to switch it one more time and say, let's get back to the tribulation again. Let's do it again. I've already gave you let's do it from 7 agents of judgment. All right, let's back up, do it one more time. Then we'll do 7 bowls of wrath. All right, let me flip this thing over one more time. Okay, I'm going to give you a little sermon. Let's do this one more time about judgment of the harlot, what God's going to do. That's 6 major blocks. The 7th major block is, he's going to turn it one more time and say, and now let's talk about the new heavens and new earth. Now, if I'm right, and if Talbert and others are right, this recapitulation means this is not a chronological description of a bunch of seals undone, and then a bunch of trumpets happen, and then this happened, and then like it's the year 1900, then year 1905. So if this is right, it's not a sequence of this, then this, then this, then this. It's rather talking about the same event from different ways of looking at it.
So it's all one time.
Is it all one time? More like the same event. The word time makes me nervous, but it's all about the same event. So technically speaking, is in the same time? No, because John is very aware in the first century, the new heavens and new earth haven't happened yet. So he's very aware that's down the road. But I do think John thinks most of the things he describes as tribulation are occurring in his time. Like seals 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe 5, 6, like trumpets 1, 2, 3, 4. He's just getting at it different ways. It seems to me. And he makes all of his audience go, where's the 7th trumpet? When's that going to happen? Are we going to make it? Yeah, hold on. I'm going to get there. It's going to take me what we call chapter 21. Then I want to give you what's going to
A
happen.
little bit like a flashback in a movie where they have you see it and then you flashback and see a little bit more.
Very much like a flashback. Very good, like a flashback. It's very. What are those movies called? The movies like when they have several different characters, kind of vignettes of different characters. All the 3 or 4 different running narrative lines, but they all intersect at different ways. And at the very end, there's kind of a climax at the very end of how they finally intersect. That's a good way of thinking about it. It's like that. If that the seals and trumpets, kind of like the Ocean's 12, kind of like that. So let me say it this way. If you took the seals, the trumpets, the agents of wrath, the bowls of wrath, they're all talking about the same thing in 4 ways. Bad tribulation. That's it.
So 3 and 6.
Then 3 and 6 are little sermons to unpack specific things. That's right. 3 and 6 are different. And then the 7th big block is the consummation. That's what I think. That's what Talbert. Does that make sense to you? If not, you don't have to agree with this. I'm telling you that's how I'm presenting the material.
What happens with
People who view it as literal are very confused. I'm not being mean. They're very confused because what do you do with the fact that it says the sun? Remember, because they think the sun and their a modern literalist thinks they thought the sun was an astral body, a burning gaseous body in the star. So they're very confused. They think the moon. They thought a moon was a big thing in the sky. So they're already wrong about that. Their astral geography is wrong. The ancient people didn't think that. The sun wasn't a ball of gas. It was a hole in the firmament. So they're really confused when they say it turned to blood and it all destroyed, and then there were mountains. They said, throw the mountains on top of me. And then later on when it gets to the trumpets, it starts all over. And so back to her question, what about the 3rd? If you're reading this literally, judgment's already happened. They're all dead. Or the mountains are gone. Well, how do you explain that? Well, there must have been part of the earth that wasn't done just yet. I mean, or now we've moved planets. I mean, what do we do? The point is, it's very, very confusing. And then especially when you get to the 7 agents of judgment and then the 7 bowls of wrath. Like, dadgummit, who's alive left? Who's left? How many mountains are left? The point is, right, because it's not chronological like that. They're not. It's a way to describe apocalyptic imagery of terrible tribulation. So, good question. Now, what I'm thinking now is, just now, I want to touch on a couple commonly discussed, badly misunderstood topics. We're going to jump around a little bit. Okay, so what I'm doing now is we've covered the seals. I'm not covering the trumpets because it's a kind of a repeat. And then I want to fill a little bit on this first sermon, I called it. So look in chapter 12. Well, it is chapter 11, verse 19. God's temple in heaven was opened, and I want you to think just his presence, not literally a temple. Later on in 21, we'll see there is no temple, a literal temple is God's dwelling. And heaven was open. Remember, the ancient people thought the heavens, the cosmos, was the temple of the gods. That's how people like John Walton, who I'm convinced is right, thinks that Genesis 1 is about God building his temple, and that temple is the cosmos. So God's temple in heaven was open, and the ark of his covenant was seen within his temple. Jews believe the ark of the covenant was absconded away, that the bad guys really didn't get it, and it's in the heavenly realm waiting on them. There were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and heavy hail. This is a classic example all through Exodus and Isaiah of God's appearance. Remember I said somewhat, probably literally actually, because they thought the gods lived on top of the mountains, and that's where the thundered and lightning. So it became probably a good metaphor for God's appearance. There's thunder and lightning and so forth. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun. She's a big old heavy woman. Right, she's clothed with the sun because she's radiant. She's radiant, the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. Now this might be allusion to the actual constellations, but she has 12 stars. She was pregnant. She's crying out in birth pains and agony of giving birth. Another sign appearing in heaven, behold, a great red dragon. He has 7 heads, 10 horns. On his heads had 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. If you imagine that in their perspective, see, if you're thinking floating in space, you're already thinking like a moderner, so stop it. They're thinking the firmament is hard, so it's one-dimensional. So here's a being that's gargantuan. They looked up in the sky. These are huge images. Of course, that's apocalyptic. It's cosmic. It's massive. So here's a great red dragon. It's great because its tail sweeps a third of the stars. I mean, imagine if you had a third of the stars, those dots. And then it's red, of course, is murderous. It's of death. And there's a woman there, but here it is. He's got 7 heads, and of course, these 7 heads means sources of knowledge. And he's got 10 horns. The horns are already authoritative. 10 means whole or complete. So this is a very scary, authoritative creature with 7 diadems. Now, clearly this references Satan, or we might call the Satan figure, the devil figure. And the diadem is not Stephanos, because he's not a victor. In this sense, he's more like royalty. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth. So she's pregnant. Anybody know what that's like? That when she bore her child, he might devour it. He's waiting. He's at the delivery room. He's going to get the baby. And she gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. That's from Isaiah 7. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for about 1,260 days. That's 3.5 years, which is half of 7.
I meant to say about, did you have
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I said about, sorry. It's 1,260 days. Yeah, it's not about. That's 3.5 years, so it's half of 7, so it's a short period of time as well. So what's going on here? Most interpreters see this as Israel is the woman who gives birth to a male child, the Messiah. And when the dragon is ready to devour it, it doesn't devour it. The dragon doesn't devour it all. In fact, it comes out, God gets them right in time, and the woman runs off into the wilderness. That is, and there's prepared by God. God's watching out for this at this time, just Jews, just Israel. And
I heard 2 preachers talk about this.
2 preachers talk about this Christmas narrative.
That's not, should be used to that.
Bless his heart. Well, it's possible. So is this useful for Christmas? Is it useful for Christmas? It's possible because you said you're going to give birth to a male child. Most New Testament interpreters do not think that. Most New Testament interpreters do not think this is about the birth of Jesus. Almost everybody in critical scholarship think this is about his death and resurrection and ascension. And there's a word we use for that, his glorification. And there's a lot of reasons to think that, but I tend to find that pretty compelling too. That is, to be born by God is to be enthroned by him. Now let me argue this just for a second. If you go to Psalm 2, I think at verse 9, And it says, "This is my son, and in whom I will please. Today I have begotten you." Today I have begotten you. Does that sound familiar at all? Because that's exactly what is said in the baptismal of Jesus. Remember baptismal rites in Mark chapter 1. So when he's baptized, the voice from heaven says, "This is my son, in whom I am pleased. Today I have begotten you." He doesn't say, it depends on which gospel you read, but "today I have begotten you" literally means I have born you. That is, I birthed you. But that was from Psalms. And the Psalms that were used for the kings, it was enthronement. If Chris, and when he's going to become king of Houston, I was like saying, if a prophet showed up, and Leonard the prophet showed up and said, "Today God has birthed you," no one thought you literally popped out of his womb. It means it's enthronement. That's important because people like Jordy, the firstborn son, are now heirs to the throne. So it became a metaphor for when the gods chose you. Okay, that's how the early Christians also could speak about Jesus being enthroned as well. So, though it's not sure, it might be literally when he was born of Mary. Most interpreters say, no. When it says caught up, verse 5, but her child was caught up to God and to his throne, that is a clear allusion to the ascension. Now, who cares about that? Because in the early church, stay with me, in the book of Acts, it says very, very clearly in other places too, that Jesus was crucified, he was buried, and it says, remember this in the book of Acts, and Peter gives a speech, and God raised him up and made him be both Lord and Messiah. So a common belief in those speeches and other places is that at Jesus' resurrection and ascension into the heavenly realms, by the way, a little footnote, remember this, those who are in my classes, ascension means he's enthroned. When the heavens were split open and he went to the heavenly realm, it's not he goes, well, where'd he go? Well, he's gone. See you later, Jesus. Everybody who's Jewish would have thought he's being enthroned to rule because the throne's there. He's coming to sit down to rule. Well, they started talking about that event as the time, it's a messianic claim. God enthroned him. It's like he gave him birth.
So is the idea of...
That's exactly what I read it, and many New Testament interpreters do, and that is, to repeat what you just said, that the event here that's going on is not his birth by Mary, but his death. What looked like Satan's defeat of Jesus, it was not his defeat. He was, in fact, caught up to God and ascended and safe, and so was the people of Israel. So, and I'll go on a little bit here. So I think that this is not about Christmas. This is about death and resurrection and ascension. And many, I would say most New Testament interpreters do. In verse 7, war arose in heaven. Michael and his angels. Michael is one of the only named angels in the Old Testament, Daniel chapter 10. Michael is a major archangel. And his angels fighting against the dragon, so fighting against evil and Satan. And the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who was called the devil, Diabolos, and Satan, Hasatan. Devil means deceiver, Hasatan means the accusing one. That's why they call him the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And then he says, I heard a loud voice saying, now the salvation, and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. Let me say several things about that, and then we're probably out of time.
So were they thrown down to the earth where their status was Lord, or where
they were sent down to earth to wreak havoc on earth?
Okay.
And this is John's way of explaining. Remember, let me go back a little bit to I use the word sermon. I think this is John's way of explaining why it is that people in this time period, in John's audience, have experiencing. It's one of the explanations for why they experience temptation and tribulation. One of the other explanations is because God is causing it. He's opening seals. He's blowing trumpets. He's sending angels of death. He's pouring whatever. He's causing it. Other times, it's evil itself. Let me say something very briefly about this, if I can, if you're with me. In the Old Testament, Ha-Satan, that literally is Hebrew, Ha-Satan. So when you say Satan, you're speaking Hebrew. Ha-Satan means the accusing one. It's not his name. He doesn't have a formal name, Satan. In Hebrew, I can prove that because you don't put the article. Satan is a title, but just said Satan. It says, and that's why you heard me just say Ha-Satan. It's the accusing one. So we didn't have a name yet. He's never named. He only shows up in Job and also in Zechariah. But really, he starts in Job. And the image of Ha-Satan, the accusing one, is this spiritual being who was created by God, apparently, whose job it is to go around and say, hey, I found someone who's not faithful. His job is to be a tattletale. And it's called accusing one because he accuses people of doing wrong. As my Old Testament professor said, It's like saying he's a prosecuting attorney. His job is to bring you before court, which is a good courtroom scene, is very popular in the Old Testament theology. He brings you before court and says, this guy's guilty, Leonard's guilty, Chris is guilty, I saw him do X, Y, Z. So his job is to point out when people do wrong things. And in Job, that's exactly what he does. To a degree, he goes and says, I found a guy. His name is Job. And I guarantee you the only reason he's faithful is because you blessed him with a bunch of cattle and women. Maybe in that order, I don't know. And if you took all that stuff away, he'd curse your name. I'd bet you he would. And God says, we'll see about that. Just don't lay a finger on him. That is, don't kill him. But I'll let you see that. Let's see if you're telling the truth. So in Job, Hasatan is not evil. He's not a bad guy. He's doing his job. He's a minor character in Job. The major character, of course, is Job and God. Because when he does take all the stuff, guess what Job does? He's real tempted to curse God and die. That's what his friends tell him. If I were you, I'd curse God and die. You're just a loser sinner. You've done something wrong. He ends up not cursing God, but he sure wants to cry out to him. By the time we get to what's called the intertestamental period, when the Old Testament's finished being written, what we call being finished written, Jews kept writing books, and you can read them. They showed up some in the Apocrypha and some other documents. They kept on writing. In this time period, the role of Satan developed. He went from just this accusing, prosecuting attorney to now he wants to make you do the wrong thing. He doesn't say when you tripped. He tries to trip you, then say you tripped. Ha, you did that. Well, it's your fault. Yeah, but you still did it. So he becomes a proactive attacker. And by the time we get to the New Testament, what? He's a bully. He's a very big bad bully. In the New Testament, they call him a roaring lion looking to devour. So by the New Testament era, they've changed or evolved or adapted their theology about Hasatan. And now he has a name. Now they usually call him Hasatan or Satan. He takes on a formal attribute. We know that character you're talking about. He's not just an accusing one. He wants us to fail. And it's their way. Okay, at minimum, they are literally talking about a literal, actual spiritual creature. That could be true. Or the other extreme is they are personifying evil. Evil is real, they would say. Any Jew would say, and so should Christians. This is like it's so bad. It's so indicative of our time period. It must be like a force itself. Either way you take, I don't care. Satan is evil, and sometimes they call him devil, or diabolos is the Greek. Hasatan is Hebrew. Diabolos means deceiver. That name got attributed later. Sometimes they call him Beelzebul, like in Mark 3. That's an old Lord of the Flies, Lord of the Deception. He has a lot of bad names. He's a bad dude. Okay, that's the one thing I want to say about Satan very quickly. Here he's pictured as a dragon. He's not literally a dragon. The Bible's not literally saying Puff the Magic Dragon exists. That is, it's serpent, evil, which is a throwback to Genesis, because the serpent did what? Tempted. And that's the point. And that's why the serpent in Christian history and Jewish history too developed a theological belief that the serpent was evil. In Genesis, he's not. In no way, I'm shaking my head radically. You can't see this on the podcast. You cannot. In the Old Testament, that is not the point of Genesis. He is not an evil creature. He's not let loose. He's not called Satan. It is just simply a serpent. And in the ancient, we'll footnote there, I have to say this because it's so confusing. In the ancient world, serpents were considered very wise or very shrewd and cunning. Like Aesop's fables when the animals can talk. Well, that's just how the ancient people, there was a common go-to image. That's why pharaohs had the image of I can't remember, there's a Greek word for that. That frustrates me now. That the cobra on their head. They would have that on their head because it's an image of wisdom or shrewdness. Later on, Jews started developing this idea that there's got to be something more going on with that serpent than just he's part of the animals that just tempt, which isn't that surprising to them, but he's tempting. It must have been he had an evil force. It's like that. Either he really was Satan incarnate or he's like it. And then through the centuries, you develop this pattern. David, is it bad to think and read Genesis and think, is that Satan? I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's accurate. And it distorts Genesis, and I don't like distorting what the Bible says. I want to read it for what it said and what it meant to them. And in the year, probably around 1000 to 500 BC, when that story was formulated and finally written down, there was no Satan figure, as far as we know. So I don't like to read into the text what's not there. Is it true to say that Satan tempts? I think that's fine. Christians have come to develop that idea. But all that to say, I don't read Satan and the devil and evil into Genesis. That's me. Most Christians disagree.
I've seen him in words, but I'm not sure that
You thought the serpent did have evil motives in Genesis. Okay. Okay, you can think that. You can think that. My response is the text doesn't say that. So I don't find that
So
compelling.
what does the text say about...
The text just says the serpent came and was chatting with him, and the serpent said, is that really what he said, you'll die? He didn't say you'll die. So he offers an alternate narrative of what God really said or what he really meant.
But it's inaccurate.
That's a complex issue. It is, well, kind of yes and no. And maybe we can cover Genesis sometime. but in general, yes, it's inaccurate, yes. What I'm suggesting is, based on what we know of how Egyptians and other Mesopotamian cultures thought of other animals, different animals were associated with certain things. And the serpent was associated with either wisdom or being shrewd or cunning. So it's no surprise that the serpent is used as an image for he's being shrewd. He's trying to find, that's the best word, shrewd or cunning. He's trying to find a way to get out of that contract.
He's trying to what?
Get out of that contract. You know, that person who's looking for a way out, like our kids do when they don't want to clean their room. But you said, the right word you said was, they're shrewd. They're not necessarily evil. They're just trying to find a way out. Now, in Genesis, I think the author is trying to suggest that that's what we do too. That humans also make up the same message. Did he really say, I think that's the idea.
I think that's the answer really to my question.
That's what I think. Which is different from an evil force attacking God and his kingdom.
That's right.
Now, I'm saying this one more time, I'll move on. Be very clear. Jews and Christians for centuries have said what I just said is wrong. They say, no, David, the serpent is the devil incarnate, and he was the force behind it, and that's true. And I'm saying that is a general traditional view. So I try to present, and a lot of people talk. You can believe that, you can believe whatever you want. I'm saying I don't find that compelling because that's not what's in Genesis. And so I tend to read Genesis for what Genesis has to say and then go from there.
You're saying
I'm trying to be fair.
serpent, but it says dragon.
Genesis. In Genesis, serpent. Yeah, and dragon, that's right.
I'm back to Revelation. But
Back in Revelation is dragon, yes. I'm convinced they thought the same thing.
Well, but it says that ancient serpent right behind it,
it
dragon.
doesn't-
Very good.
Well, I really do like your explanation that it really looks into an insight about us and how we try to manipulate God.
How we try to manipulate God, insight like in Genesis. Yeah, I think it does try to, and I think that's one of the chief points. The point is, that's right. Is that?
That's really good.
Well, thank you. I'll say this last thing because we're.
Footnotes, just garbage.
Oh, my footnotes.
Sorry, the serpent, Satan.
Yeah. And can I say this one more time because this is a great example. It is I think, a great example of. We say, David, how do you make up your mind? Is it bad to believe that it is the evil Satan working through the serpent in Genesis? Well, you can believe that. You can believe the moon's made of cheese. You can believe whatever you want to believe. The issue is, I'm trying to encourage us all, sisters and brothers in Christ, when you read the text, what does the text say? The text does not say that serpent is evil. It does not say Satan. It does not say devil. And you say, well, David, it can mean that. Well, fine. I can be compelled to that too. It can mean it. The answer is then why? And to me, you've got to make a big, massive case. One, all the evidence is against you in the text. Two, there's no evidence that Jews thought the serpent was evil or of the devil that long time ago. They came to that belief. Then the question is, you're asking, well, they came to the belief. Does that mean it was true all along and they just figured it out later? I learned how to do complicated math when I was older. Well, it's still true. And that is possible. So I'm saying those are all possible answers. It could be really Satan. It's just in footnotes and stuff when it says, it's Satan. I want to go, well, hold on a second. Let's hear what Genesis has to say first. And if you assume it's not an evil devil Satan, it makes perfect sense.
I think where it's helped me through the years and frustrated me at the same time.
I think it's great. So Elaine's point is that what she likes about it is going back, even teach children or adults, anybody, going back to what the text actually says. And that usually frustrates a lot of people up front. But what I have found in my experience is they're not frustrated because what the text says. They're frustrated because all of their stinking lives they've been taught something differently. And they feel been lied to To which I always say, and you should have read the text. That is, don't daggum swallow what everyone's feeding you. Read the text. Be bothered when the preacher or teacher says, and then Satan tempted Adam. You go, what? Can I raise my hand for a second? Why did you just say that? I'm missing Satan.
I think one other good thing is that
Good, right. So when you suffer the anxiety of, I've never heard this before, well,
maybe it's all false.
don't quit the faith, for crying out loud. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. Right. I like that. I appreciate that. Say this last thing. If you look back in verse 7, the war rose in heaven and Michael and his angels and so forth. This is almost certainly supposed to be understood as a simultaneous event. That the dragon, the beast, as it were, is trying to get Israel's trying to get the Messiah. Evil is fighting. Angels are fighting. They win. They cast down the demons, and they cast down, of course, the dragon. They're defeated. The New Testament oftentimes gives a different view of something. There are different theological, I'm going to say it this way, there are different sermons in the New Testament. In Mark, if you remember your Mark, in Mark chapter 1, Jesus is baptized. He's thrown out. He's tempted by the devil. You remember that? Remember that scene, right? He comes out, and then and it goes to chapter 2 and 3, of course. But in chapter 2, he's healing a person. And he says, first, you got to first bind the strong man. Then you can plunder his house. You remember the analogy he gives in? Because the demons are coming. And the analogy is, first you got to beat the bad guy. Then all the minions are no big deal. In Mark's text, the defeat of Satan happens when Jesus defeats his temptations. In Mark's text, when he fights temptation, the rest of the narrative, Jesus never struggles with evil. He just boom, 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 boom. He's never like, oh, here comes another demon, I'm scared. He's beaten him. It's over. And that's what I plunder the strong man. It's over. Okay? In John's gospel, the defeat of Satan happens at his ascension and glorification. We could go look at the text if you want to. In Luke's gospel, the defeat of Satan happens when he sends them on mission. The missionary, the 72, he sends them on mission, missionary work. They come back, and they're saying, it worked. The kingdom of God came on certain villages, and we cast out demons in your name, and people were back. Woohoo! And Jesus says, and I saw Satan fall from heaven. So in Luke's text, the defeat of Satan happens at their first, apparently the first, major evangelism explosion. Their first missionary trip, the disciples. That's when Satan was defeated. In Colossians, it's at Jesus' death and resurrection. So John and Colossians are similar. That's John and Paul. In Revelation, the devil is defeated at what? His death and ascension. So in the New Testament, we have different theological interpretations. If I'm asking you all these Christians in this room, when was evil's power really beaten? And Jacob says, I don't have a clue. Jacob might say, when Jesus first fought against him at temptation, that's when he beat him. And then Jason says, no. It was the first missionary trip when he sent those disciples out and the kingdom of God came upon the people. And then Lane says, no. It was at his death and a resurrection. And then Erica says, no, really at his ascension. That's when it really happened. What I just did was what the New Testament has done for us. And that's one of the reasons why I hate the word systematic theology. It's just not all systematic. If you believe in inspiration, fine. God inspired these authors to give different theological interpretations to when evil was defeated. And John's view here is that it was at his ascension. And when the war broke out, he was defeated, sent down to earth. Not ultimately defeated, but defeated in his authority in the heavenly realms. Because even in John, he has crowns, he has diadems, he had royalty, he was the authority figure. And now he no longer has the authority. He's cast down, where us peeps live. So that's John's vision of when evil was defeated. It was at the ascension and glorification of Jesus of Nazareth. But the problem in John's gospel is, now he's stuck with us. He's in our realm. And because of that, he is behind, he is the source, he fuels, we'll see, chapter 13, these beasts. And the beasts, of course, are Rome and the Roman leadership. And we don't have time right now, we're out of time. But he will say very clearly that, he does, it's clear, but he uses metaphor, that when he comes to earth, the dragon keeps fighting. He's lost his heavenly authority, but on earth, he gives a brand new kingdom on earth, and he uses one major puppet. He has one major glove where his hand fits, and it's the Roman authorities. And in John the Revelator and his theology, Satan works through Roman imperial power, forcing you with this. You've got the big flags that fly. That's sermon number 3 in the block narrative. And block number 6, which is later on chapter 19 and so forth, he's going to say Satan works not through Roman imperial power, but through economic power. So Satan tempts by wanting you to bow down at the temple of Caesar. They literally had temples. You went and offered incense to the emperor. That's a temptation. That's a real temptation his audience faced. Later on, he's going to say now he's working through economic seduction. Give in to the wears and tears of the worldly materialism kind of stuff. And in his time period, those are the 2 major things he says are the major temptations for his people. And for his view, Satan is the reason why they're being tempted. Okay, that's it.
We should really embrace the fact that different authors,
We should embrace the fact that different authors have different perspectives.
like you were explaining about
Yeah.
when temptation was defeated, when sin was defeated.
Well, you can embrace it or you don't and say, I don't want to believe any of it. No, the point is, it's still there.
Or either
Yeah. I encourage people to embrace it because it's our text. Yeah, I agree. I don't think we have to say, no, it's only one time it happened. Why isn't all of it true? Satan was constantly defeated at the temptations, at the evangelism, at his death. He always broke his authority. A little footnote, you won't hear this preached in your entire life, Noel. They're going to find one Bible verse and say, see, that was the time it happened. Well, that's fine. It's just from that person's perspective, but it's not necessarily the biblical view.
I think that we would have more success.
You think we have more success by talking to our unbelieving
Not
friends?
necessarily in conflict.
That's exactly right. I concur. I completely concur, Noel. When we talk to non-believers, we up front should, if they ever say, why are the differences? Up front say, absolutely there are. There's a rich variety of understanding the significance of the kingdom of God, the significance of what God has done through Jesus. Absolutely. There's not univocal expression. There's it's this multifaceted understanding of what God has done through people. So which story would you like to look at first? Or which lens do you want to look through? There's many of them. We can go to the Gospels, go to Paul, go to John, go to Revelation. Absolutely. I completely agree. We don't go, no, it's all, and it's scary. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you want more, go to davidpendergrass.com, davidpendergrass.com. If you look at the top, you'll see various tabs that have sermons I've preached, a link to all the podcasts I've done so far, a link to my consulting website. For more information about my consulting, see davidpendergrassconsulting.com. Also, you'll see information about the books I've written that are found on amazon.com. So davidpendergrass.com, one-stop shop, all that you need. If you want to reach out to me, follow me on Twitter at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass, and send me a message. I'll see you online.